Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning and a warm welcome to the CII National Conference on Responsive Supply Chain for Indian Manufacturing, Facilitating Manufacturing Excellence. Before we begin, I would request everyone to kindly put their phones on silence to avoid any disturbances during the session. We will now be beginning with our inaugural session, which is a fireside chat on supply chain resilience in times of disruption, strategies for the future for Viksit Bharat. I would now invite on stage Mr. Subban Berry, Honorable Vice Chairperson, Niti Aayog and Chairman, Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, Government of India, Mr. Dilip Sahani, Chairman, CII National Committee on Smart Manufacturing and Managing Director, Rockwell Automation India Private Limited, Mr. Deepak Shetty, Chairman, CII Council on Manufacturing Excellence and CEO and Managing Director, JCB India Limited, and Mr. Virendra Gupta, Deputy Director General, CII. I request you all to kindly come forward for a photo opportunity, please. Now, I will hand over the stage to Mr. Dilip Sahani for his introductory remarks.
Well, thank you so much, and it's great to see a room full of people here, and rightly so for a topic like what we are here to discuss. So it's first of all my privilege to welcome all of you to the CII National Conference on Responsive Supply Chain for Indian Manufacturing with the theme Facilitating Manufacturing Excellence. Right. At the outset, I extend a special welcome to Shri Subban Berry, the Honorable Vice Chairperson for Niti Aayog, whose vision and leadership are instrumental in driving India's economic transformation. The industry is optimistic about Niti Aayog's vision to navigate the future of Indian manufacturing. Your leadership, sir, is pivotal in advancing operational excellence and global competitiveness in the manufacturing sector in particular. A very warm welcome also to Mr. Deepak Shetty, the Chairman for CII's Council on Manufacturing Excellence, and the CEO and Managing Director for JCB India Limited, who's been a strong pillar in championing the industry's manufacturing agenda under the aegis of CII. Now, first of all, Shri Berry, I must acknowledge that CII has enjoyed a very strong and a special relationship with Niti Aayog, and I'm confident that it will be further strengthened under your kind leadership, sir. CII is committed to supporting the government and the industry through continued dialogue and capacity building initiatives. India's manufacturing sector stands at a critical inflection point with immense opportunities to drive economic growth and global competitiveness. I believe that we must focus on technology adoption, supply chain disruptions, and access to finance to enhance efficiency and domestic productivity. The points of disruption are indeed giving us an opportunity as much as it is creating some risk for us. Right? In today's interconnected world, global supply chain disruptions are forcing manufacturers to rethink their strategies to reduce risk, optimize costs. This is India's moment to step up, move fast, and establish itself as a key player on the global stage. For the industry to proactively embrace new technologies and innovative processes in order to remain competitive, CII has been at the forefront of promoting Industry 4.0 initiatives through various programs and initiatives aimed at fostering a culture of digital transformation across the industry. We recognize that for India to emerge as a global manufacturing powerhouse, our supply chains must not only be responsive, but also data-driven and AI-enabled. Today's discussion aligns closely with the recently announced National Manufacturing Mission, which has set a strong foundation for fostering a resilient manufacturing industry and ecosystem with a focus on improving productivity, quality, and of course, global competitiveness. Now, before I hand over the stage to Mr. Shetty, once again, I extend my gratitude to Shri Berry for his unwavering support, and I look forward to Niti's continued collaboration with CII in shaping a strong manufacturing sector. And with that, Deepak, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dilip. Good morning, friends, and once again, it's really my honor to welcome Sri Suman Beri, the Honorable Vice Chairperson, Niti Aayog, and also the Chairman of the Economic Advisory Council to the Honorable Prime Minister of India. Sir, thank you very much for joining us. Sir, can I first request you to share your thoughts on this topic with the audience before we get into the fireside chat?
I'm happy to. Well, first let me acknowledge my appreciation to be given this platform. Let me also say that there's two or three things. One is I returned to India from my time at the World Bank in 2001 and had Todun Das as a member of my governing body at the NCAR. And as a consequence, my association with CII is 25 years old. And so this is just a small way of paying back the support that Todun in particular and CII has given to the cause of economic reform over the last quarter century. The second point I would make is that 2 points. One is that India actually is in a pretty decent place, and that has both, if you like, advantages and disadvantages, which I'll quickly talk about. Why do I say it's in a decent place? It's because, as you know, it has bounced back very sharply from COVID to be the largest, the fastest growing large economy as acknowledged by the IMF, and that is likely to remain the case. Our inflation is moderate, and measured by Niti Aayog's multidimensional poverty index, that measure of poverty, as well as other measures of poverty associated with the World Bank, and I think they're about to release their assessment of our poverty situation based on recent surveys. So that also is looking pretty good. My two final introductory points would be that that growth, that the sources of growth are a little bit mysterious, but what one can say is that growth takes place through two fundamental channels: innovation, but also what economists would call the gains from trade. And it's the gains from trade that, in my mind, provide the context of this conversation. And also in this room, there's also been, I've also been part of the steering group that looks at national connectivity. So what does one mean by the gains from trade? You can think of India as a lot of isolated economies in, if you like, historical times. And between GST on the one hand and the infrastructure push under Prime Minister Modi, we are partway to becoming a fully integrated national market. And that is a very powerful driver of growth. So where we are right now in our Amrit Kal, with a need to accelerate the growth rate of the Indian economy, which has been doing well, protecting and enhancing the great gains from trade are at the macro conceptual level what this discussion should be about. But this was meant to be a fireside chat. These issues might come up in our conversation as well. I just wanted to give you an economist perspective because it's noteworthy. I'm the third Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog, and Honorable Prime Minister 3 times in a row has gone to economists for Vice Chairman. And as you know, in the long history of the Planning Commission, it was really only the last 10 years under the UPA that the Vice Chairman or the Deputy Chairman was an economist. Before that, it tended to be politicians. Over to you, Sri Shetty.
Thank you very much, sir. You really set the context for the discussion, and I would also like to thank my friend Dilip for setting the stage for this discussion. I would also thank with all the participants. At times, when we talk subjects like manufacturing, logistics, supply chain, I don't see many halls full. But of late, we are seeing, and that also showcases the interest that the industry has and how important is the session that we are going to talk about. And lastly, I would like to thank all our participants who are joining us through YouTube and also through Doordarshan who are connected with us. Sir, you mentioned about the Indian economy, and it is with such a pride when we talk to our colleagues around the world that we continue to be the fastest growing economy in the world. The growth trajectory that we have, we are the 5th largest economy from the GDP point of view. Recent reports talk about us almost being as close to $4 trillion. Obviously, the journey is towards $5 trillion that the Honorable Prime Minister has been speaking about. So what are your thoughts about the trajectory that we have? Because we sometimes hear that is it sustainable, not sustainable, and particularly in light of the geopolitical changes which are taking place around the world. How is India placed in its trajectory to go towards $5 trillion economy?
Okay, firstly, I think we are at 4 trillion, and those of you who chose to hear Honorable PM, his interventions in the webinar series, post-budget webinar series over the last couple of days, would note that he also acknowledged that India now is at 4 trillion. So I mentioned, as it were, that there are both upsides and downsides to where we are right now. The upside is that we've got a strong track record. The downside is that both internationally and domestically, actually getting momentum behind reform is much harder when you're doing well than when you are not doing so well. And so the political challenge is, in fact, which is what Honorable PM has been attempting to do, is really to persuade people that this is no time to relax. Okay, so that's the first point. Now, the IMF that you mentioned, partly because they don't really look at the long term, their most recent Article 4 report, which is their report on the Indian economy, talks of 6.5% growth being sustained over the horizon that they look at. The World Bank has just come out with a report as well, where they say that according to their metric, and I don't want to get into the details, India could become an advanced economy by 2047, but there's a lot of heavy lifting to be done. I would say that India is large enough so that domestic reform would get us a substantial part of the way, but as in time the 3rd largest economy, and we're seeing this now in our interactions with the US administration, more will be asked of us, and we should be ready for that. Economists draw a distinction between a small open economy, which we have been thinking of ourselves as being, and systemically important economies, which we have now become gradually. And the behavior and leadership expected from a systemically important economy is different from a small open economy. And let me also make one final point, which is that we remain, as it were, the country with the lowest per capita GDP in the G20, which therefore means that the space open to us to grow fast is more than any of the others, okay? So this is the political economy challenge and a conundrum. We can grow fast, we need to grow fast, but to mobilize a fifth of mankind to actually redouble its efforts when things seem to be going reasonably well, that's where political leadership is involved, and that's where we're fortunate that we have, as it were, an experienced leader, the Prime Minister, in his third term, who knows how the economy works.
Thank you very much, sir, for that perspective. Really very heartening to see that you feel confident about the trajectory and the way forward. For years together, we have been talking about services sector and manufacturing sector as the two sort of pillars for the growth, or the turbochargers for the growth. For last 20 years, we have seen the contribution of service sector has been huge. Many of us in the manufacturing sector believe that time is now for the manufacturing sector, and particularly in line with the Honorable Prime Minister's vision of Make in India, or Atmanirbharta, Make in India for the world. However, when we look at the data for last few years, the contribution of manufacturing sector to the GDP has been around 15-16%. Obviously, the aim is to go towards 25%. From the policymakers' point of view, how you are seeing this journey from 15% to 25%? And I know that it is not only, the responsibility is not only on the government, the private sector, the public sector, the industry at large also has a role to play. What are your views on this, sir?
It's a complex question, and I hope my response won't be so nuanced that I will lose people. Let me start by saying that since the Industrial Policy Resolution of 1957, which is now 60 years ago, it has been the single-minded policy goal of government to, as it were, restore India to its former manufacturing glory. And we somehow succeed in everything else, but don't seem to succeed in that. So we need to be a little cautious. Second, given our per capita income, which, as I said, I think it's entirely appropriate for the share of GDP of manufacturing, not just industry, but manufacturing in GDP to rise. But I think we need to be clear why we want that to happen and what is realistic. Because there is a concept in economics called path dependence, which is what you do today is very much dependent on, your legacy, as it were. Now, China over-industrialized, arguably Germany over-industrialized, and they have shares of manufacturing in GDP which are higher than the norm. If you look at countries like countries in the G20, which are more affluent than us, 18% or 20% is closer to a norm. But as I say, we are not as affluent as them, so it's a reasonable aspiration. Now the question becomes, what can we do about it? I think the model that we used to, that has guided our development trajectory, has been more or less the East Asian model, that you get labor out of agriculture into low-skill manufacturing, and that is how you increase productivity. For whatever reason, our trajectory has been different. Our trajectory has been that we've become much more successful at, if you like, high value-added products, and not so good at the labor-intensive products. This is no reason to give up, but I just want to define what the problem is. And the second, and the two are related, is that research suggests that for all kinds of reasons, India's enterprises, both corporate and otherwise, have an aversion to adding labor. Now, whether this is because of labor laws or labor indiscipline or labor skills, that's a large issue that I won't get into. But the fact of the matter is that we do splendidly in exporting services, but we are much less successful in the export of labor-intensive manufacturing, quite successful in capital-intensive manufacturing. The final point is that we need to be clear why we want this to rise. I would say that a large country like India must have a vibrant manufacturing sector, in part for national security reasons, because we should not be as dependent as we have on external suppliers for armaments, etc. But that it's not clear to me that manufacturing is going to be the solution to our employment problem, which is what the old model used to be. One other point, and I'll probably, which is that you had mentioned manufacturing and services. It's significant that this year's budget, as well as the first of Hon'ble Prime Minister's webinars, started with agriculture. Dr. Chand at Niti Aayog, really has persuaded me that agriculture is a sunrise sector, particularly horticulture and animal husbandry, fisheries, less so crop. And an important insight that we have from research done by a friend of mine at Harvard is that the demand for manufacturing is going to come from a vibrant agricultural sector. To sum up all of what I've said, we have thought that the problems are on the supply side. We've not paid enough attention to the demand for manufacturers. I think it's time that we did.
Thank you, sir, for that perspective. And the comment you made about the growth of India coming from rural sector, I really second it, because from JCB point of view, even today, 65% of our machines are sold in rural India. In last few years, we have seen the pull for the machine in rural India is much more stronger than for urban. Sometimes you associate these machines with construction and urbanization, but the way the agriculture sector is using this machine and also with the telematics, you can see the utilization of the machines in the rural hamlets across the country. And I think that is where the recent announcements in budget to support the rural economy is ever so important.
Right.
One of the aspects of the budget and other government announcements, and particularly driven by the Honorable Prime Minister, is on the ease of doing business. And when we talk about growth in manufacturing sector, one of the worries that our partners sometimes have is on the ease of doing business in India. And I know that, sir, Niti Aayog itself has been really very supportive, new thoughts, and also I'm sure this is something which the Economic Advisory Council also is seized off. What are your thoughts, sir, on the way forward on ease of doing business? We see regular sort of dismantling process going on the old rules, arcane rules that we have, and some of the regulations. And particularly for the entrepreneurs who are here, the whole focus on decriminalization of some of these acts, I think is very positive. Sir, your thoughts on this very important aspect?
Well, first, the states are very important in all of this. Second, you've talked of ease of doing business across the board, and the agenda of decriminalization, I think, really started from work that has been done by ORF and Manish Sabharwal about, and the Prime Minister has been fully committed to that, and my colleague Sanjeev Sanyal in the Economic Advisory Council to the PM has been, ever since he was Principal Economic Advisor, just looking at, as it were, the encrustation of obsolete rules. Um, what is the point I'm trying to make is that it's a mammoth task to take this down to the state level and to establish what the pain points are, what the where the rent seeking is. And I think this is where the CII regional councils might be able to distill what the issues are, state by state or region by region. I think it's unrealistic to think that that can be done only at the center. But another announcement in the budget, as you know, which was that NITI has been charged with coming up with a charter on the investment friendliness of each state. And we're working with CRISIL, having a number of stakeholder interactions. And as you can see, this is not an issue that only concerns India. I mean, there is a sense that in the US, as represented by DOGE, in Europe, that well-intentioned though it might be, that regulations have become a barrier to entry, particularly for MSMEs. And so I would just say that getting granular about, as it were, what inhibits MSMEs, what inhibits them from investment, from expanding employment, that's a large research and policy agenda, which we hope to illuminate a little bit by this index of investment friendliness. And let me just say that investment friendliness is not particularly about FDI. So investment friendliness, as we see with, say, Tamil Nadu, investment friendliness for domestic investors, then typically carries over to investment friendliness for foreign investors as well. And if I could make a point, we will be talking about logistics. The president of Singapore was on a state visit, and I was asked to convene a roundtable discussion, closed door. He knows India well, and he really put his finger on the point. He said, India's corporate sector seems to be comfortable operating at a suboptimal scale. And so what it would take in terms of FDI, in terms of deregulation, for us to, as it were, scale up to global levels in the ways that China was able to do, that's an important agenda for CII, I would imagine.
Yes, sir. No, I think it's a great point, sir, and I'll just change the track a bit. When we are talking about the manufacturing growth across the world, there have been two models. One is the old American model, the Detroit kind of, the big companies, large companies, or the Korean companies. On the other side, the whole concept of Mittelstand that we saw in Germany, where 99% of the firms are part of that group, which contribute to more than 60% of the job and more than 50%. One of the cornerstones of this budget is the Honorable Government's focus on MSME sector. And a lot of positive announcements have been made. I'm sure our friends in the MSME sector who are participating in this seminar would also be aware about the whole drive and also the focus on growth and innovation, particularly innovation in MSME sector. So what are your thoughts about how the government is looking at further facilitating and also a bit of your thoughts also on the PLI scheme, which probably have been the game changer in last few years, also attracting investments from outside the country?
I won't let you shift the focus to MSMEs quite so quickly, because there is a large agenda for, our large-scale enterprises, which my friend and colleague, the Chief Economic Advisor, has been pointing to, essentially in two areas, investment and R&D. So going back to the reduction in corporate tax rates that took place 3 years ago, the idea was that A, by bringing corporate tax rates to closer to global levels, we would, in a sense, give resources back to the corporate sector, and that they would deploy them in a couple of areas. One certainly is investment, and the second is in research and development. Unfortunately, up till now, we have not seen the proof of that. So, Honorable Finance Minister said just the other day that, you know, we can't force private enterprises. They have responsibilities to their stakeholders. But there is disappointment that, you know, in the fastest growing economy in the world, members of CII, etc., are still sort of sitting on their hands, you know, citing, as it were, the threat from China, now the US, etc. So, you know, since this is a CII event, we're not going to get to 7 and 8% growth without the corporate sector being a full partner. And I think it's fair to say, up till now it hasn't. It was interesting when I first joined the Reserve Bank in at the time of the international the reforms in 92 to 94, I came from a long innings on Latin America, and what struck me then was that Indian entrepreneurs had faith in their economy, and they were busy investing in India, whereas the Latinos were so suspicious about their government that they, you know, preferred to park their money offshore. I wish I could say that that sense of optimism was widespread, but it seems to really be characterized by only a handful of the big players and not to have been generalized. So I would just say before we move to MSMEs. Second, though, with CBAM, etc., we do have to think about the internal value chain as well. People are going to be looking at Scope 3 emissions, the financing of both technology and, if you like, greening of MSMEs. These are things in which the supply chain that they feed into should have a responsibility, and I'm sure in the leading sectors like automotive, they do. But on your question of how do we create the equivalent of a Mittelstand, I would make two final points, and then if you wish to take questions, perhaps we'll have to move to the audience. The first is that this is where we have miles to go to keep up with China, because China was successful in attracting. So the big boys can negotiate our complicated rules, and in some ways, those complicated rules and tax codes are a barrier to entry. But we will not be fully competitive unless we can attract MSMEs from other countries. And I think CII has a role. I think in the FTAs there's a role as well. But also attracting foreign MSMEs also depends on a vibrant relationship between our domestic MSMEs and the large-scale corporates that they form to which they contribute.
So I take your point, and the great example of this is we want to be part of the global value chain, and we have those aspirations. But I think it's very important for us to navigate or sometimes take benefit. I was just looking at the CEPA agreement which has been signed with Japan in 2011. If you look at the latest data after the agreement has been signed, 1,400 companies from Japan have invested in India. Only around 100 countries from India have invested in Japan. But in this time, what has happened in 2024, the imports from Japan is at around $17 billion, while the export from India is 5.5. So probably the India Inc. needs to take a bit of a blame that the government has set up this particular process. It's a tool which is available, a conduit, but probably we have not leveraged it well. So I thought I'll just make that point. So
Yeah, and you know, so it's an analytic question why that is, but the consequence is that you know, all of these CEPAs, and by the way, you mentioned Japan, and I, as far back as 2004, I was a member of the study group that recommended the CEPA, and you know, we've got the deepest diplomatic relationship, but for whatever reason, I've just come back from Thailand. I mean, the integration of the Thai automotive sector into the value chains or supply chains of the Japanese have been a reality for 20 years. And the CEPA has been around since 2006, I think, but we've not really. There is a terrific home bias in the activities of our large-scale manufacturers, and we've got to chip away at that.
Sir, on that note, if you're okay, I will move to the audience. I'll first request my colleague Dilip Sahani for his question. Dilip, over to you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Deepak. And Shri, very great insights. Now, in order to gain manufacturing competitiveness, of course, a number of factors need to, number of planets needs to get aligned. You know, you have to have a supplier ecosystem. Innovation has to play a role. Just wanted your perspective at a macro level. What are the top 2 or 3 areas that India needs to really be focused on as we strive for manufacturing excellence?
Well, I mean, I think Rome was not built in a day. Let me make one analytic point and then second a policy point. The analytic point, which echoes what I said earlier, is that this is a holy grail that India has been pursuing since the Industrial Policy Resolution of 1956. And I don't think the analytic community has served our political masters terribly well, because at the time of the second plan, which was coincident with this, you know, India went for the commanding heights of the economy. That was the vogue in the World Bank, in the UK, etc. But we all know how that movie ended. Fast forward to, as it were, the very impressive and aggressive trade liberalization that took place in 91 and thereafter, unilateral trade liberalization that clearly laid the foundations for sustained 6% growth, but relatively short periods in that where the growth of manufacturing was higher than the growth of GDP, and that's reflected in the fact that the share of manufacturing has been stagnant. Then the flavor of the month became labor laws, and this government has, it's a state subject, but this government has come up with model labor codes. Some states have adopted those codes, others have yet to do so, but as I said, it's not turned out to be a silver bullet. Logistics, because that's what this conference is about. I was saying to Sri Shetty that research that had been done about a decade ago by the Australian National University compared India with its Southeast Asian peers, and said that at the establishment level, India was quite competitive, but indeed it was logistics that was the drag. And based on that analysis, the huge investment in connectivity has come about. So, I think that we shouldn't despair. We should be realistic. I mean, for myself, I think that that our tariff regime and what we've talked about, the regulatory regime, these are things we need to keep chipping away at. I mean, what does Niti Aayog have to contribute to this? It is to the extent that the main beneficiaries are going to be at the level of the states, to hold up a mirror to say, okay, if you want to be a focus for investment and industrial employment, this is how you compare with others, and hopefully that will work. So I'm not promising the moon. I am saying that it's a reasonable objective, but I'm saying it's an objective for not just for being macho, but because for what it'll do for demand, what it will do for sort of internal capacity, and also because it will hopefully allow us to enter into spaces that China is vacating. Sorry for a long answer, but I'm not capable of anything shorter.
No. So thank
Thanks,
you very
sir.
much. It was very well detailed. And since we mentioned about logistics, I feel it's only fair that we have some logistics companies here, partners here. On behalf of them, I would request Mr. Praful Talera to ask his questions from Dynamic Logistics.
Good morning, sir. So, the European CBAM standards and other global standards are being imposed on us in so many ways. So, how does India plan to help our companies navigate these, sir?
Well, we had a very impressive visit by the President of the EU Commission and all her commissioners, including for the environment, including for energy, including for trade, present in Delhi at the end of February. And the press conference or the press briefing at the end of that, the two leaders, Prime Minister Modi and President von der Leyen, agreed that India should attempt to conclude an FTA with Europe this year, and it would be no surprise that this particular moment, 6 weeks after President Trump came into office, provides a new urgency to that. Now that said, as somebody who lived in Europe for 4 years and has been associated with a European think tank, I know how hardwired CBAM is into the internal ideology or the internal governance structure of the EU. I think the interesting issue is going to be whether the US, which does not have a carbon pricing system, whether Europe determines that the US is also subject to the CBAM, and then you can really see the sparks fly. So my short comment would be, let us, as it were, bide our time, see what happens. The forum, I think, in which this will be ironed out is something called the Trade and Technology Council between the EU and India, which hasn't, up till now, had a very precise agenda. But look, you know that trade negotiators are always very pessimistic until the end, because they don't want to give away their bargaining chips. But I would say, given the political commitment by the end of the year of the two leaders, both of whom are fresh, Prime Minister Modi as of last year in his third term, and President von der Leyen since December in her second term, I think that there will be a big desire to find solutions to bilateral investment treaties, CBAM, but each of these are things that both sides hold very dear for their own reasons. So it's probably going to be contentious till the end.
Sir, we are extending, sort of encroaching on your time a lot. Would it be okay for one more question, sir? If
Look, I don't know whether all of this is too cerebral for the people in this audience. They're really here to talk nuts and bolts. If you think it's a good use of
Yeah.
their time,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
The last question.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. I would request Madhav Subramaniam from ITC, representing the FMCG sector, for his question, please.
Yeah, good morning. It's a learning and which is a mind-blowing, interesting learnings which I'm taking home. My contact is purely on the upskilling aspect. So what is your views on, because India having a big pie of young Indian population, so how we will be ensuring that the skill part is taken care for making the team digitally equipped?
I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to this. So let me provide the macro context and then respond on some kind of allocation of responsibilities. So, as has been documented, including by my, close friend and somebody I admire, Surjit Bhalla, the speed and scale with which India has invested in tertiary education, engineering colleges, medical colleges, bachelor's programs, etc., has been stunning, and this will stand us in good stead in due course, but nobody would say that we've been able to achieve quality. And I would say that the same is true even in primary education. We've made huge gains in the enrollment ratio and in gender equality, but the quality of learning outcomes is what we're working on now, with some success. Okay, so we have a bulge, and not only us, where a large generation has, and this is true of China too, by the way, they're also having the same problems, has invested, or their families have invested, in their higher education with the expectation that they will get jobs at the aspirational level that were previously associated with those jobs. But often those aspirations are unrealistic, and there's a large waiting queue for government jobs, because these are seen to be the jobs that are status appropriate for the kinds of qualifications that people have got. So that's the macro problem, and it's a serious political problem, and that has what has led to initiatives like the internship scheme in the July budget. That said, we also have the opposite problem. L&T is probably in the room, and the CEO had talked about a shortage of 40,000 engineers. So this is an issue of the operation of labor markets, and it is creating huge strains. I won't deny that. Now, though, when I go and talk to, as I did, to people in hospitality, I haven't talked to people in FMCG very much, or talked to people in automotive. What I am told is that actually the raw talent is there, and that if firms invest in training, they are able to meet their labor force requirements. So I would say, in what we've done up till now, the private sector and states probably need to be involved more, in addition to the individuals. And the education system, which I know Shri Pradhan is working on, needs to integrate vocational training into the education curriculum more than it has succeeded in doing. So we don't have a lot of time, but we have some time, and I would indicate that in Europe, when I started working on it, there was a huge problem of youth unemployment, and over time, it has kind of resolved itself. So I see this as transitional, but ultimately, as I was saying, even on the manufacturing side, you have to, in a sense, work first on the demand for labor. I'm pretty sure in India, demand will provoke its own supply. And so, in that sense, for us to limit demand by being a closed economy probably is not the best thing for our aspirations for India's youth. And with that, if I may, I'll take my leave.
Sir, thank you very much. Friends, a huge round of applause to Shri Suman Berry. I know there was a lot of questions, but I think we have collected so much to assimilate and to digest. I'm sure this will also give a good foundation for the session. I would request Dilip to please present his vote of thanks quickly. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so let's first do that. Yeah. Can we have the reports, please? Thanks.
We have the reports on competitiveness. I request to kindly bring it up on stage, please. May we have a round of applause, please? I now request Mr. Sahani to kindly present his concluding remarks.
Well, thank you so much, Shri Berry, Mr. Shetty, and also Mr. Virendra Gupta, the Deputy Director General of CII. Let me present a few closing remarks from my side. First of all, the fireside chat was exceptionally engaging. It just brought out a lot of key areas where the industry and CII can collaborate and drive meaningful impact to build a globally competitive manufacturing sector here in India. On behalf of CII, I thank Shri Berry and Mr. Shetty for setting an inspiring tone for the rest of the day. Your valuable insights and your enthusiasm play a very crucial role in advancing this very important dialogue. Today's deliberations have reaffirmed the pivotal role for responsive supply chains, AI-driven innovation, and digital transformation in shaping the future of Indian manufacturing. The discussions have underscored the critical need for collaborative efforts between industry, policymakers, technology providers to build an agile, resilient, and sustainable supply chain. The path ahead requires us to invest in automation, enhance predictive analytics, drive supply chain optimization through modern techniques like AI, and embrace Industry 4.0 principles. Now, as we go down this path, I think it is also equally important that, that other measures from a risk mitigation perspective, such as cybersecurity, be embraced. I think cybersecurity also becomes a fundamental pillar in this transformation. Supply chains are becoming increasingly digital and interconnected, and ensuring that data security and safeguarding operations against cyber threats is paramount. So strengthening this aspect, cyber resilience must be also core priority alongside digital adoption. As we look ahead, the focus must be on creating resilient, transparent, technology-driven supply chains that drive manufacturing excellence. India's journey towards becoming a global manufacturing hub depends on integrating AI, automation, and real-time data analytics into supply chain networks. Moving forward, the insights gathered must be translated into concrete strategies that enhance efficiency, reduce cost, and ensure a long-term competitiveness for the Indian manufacturing sector. Shri Berry, I assure you that CII remains committed to working closely with the Niti Aayog under your esteemed leadership to strengthen and advance a globally competitive manufacturing sector. Now, the sessions lined up ahead for the rest of the day, they promise actionable insights and strategies to drive India's manufacturing sector to a brighter future. Let's make this conference a defining moment for India's manufacturing story, which I think has got a very bright future ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We now will be presenting with mementos. May I request Mr. Deepak Shetty to kindly present the memento to Mr. Suman Berry. To Mr. Dilip Sahni. I now request Mr. Dilip Sahni to present the memento to Mr. Shetty. Thank you so much. We now come to the closure of the inaugural session. We will now be making arrangements. I request everyone to kindly remain seated. Thank you. Thank you, sir.